The Hebrews in the land of Goshen grew rich and multiplied exceedingly. Each of Jacob's 12 sons became the father of a tribe of Israel, and all the tribes but one were named after Joseph's brothers. Joseph's own tribe became 2, which were named after Joseph's 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Old Jacob, father of all Israel, died, and was mourned by Egyptians and Israelites alike. Then Joseph died, and those of his generation. But still the children of Israel were fruitful, and increased to hundreds of thousands. The land was filled with them, and they were mighty. Then there arose a new king over Egypt, one who had not known Joseph and his brothers. And this Pharaoh was afraid of all these foreign people in his land, for it seemed to him that soon there would be more Israelites than Egyptians in the land of Egypt. They worked hard, and he needed them, but he did not want their numbers to increase. He said to his people, "Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal wisely with them, so that they no longer multiply. For what if there is war, and they should join our enemies and fight against us, and then leave this land? They must not go from Goshen, nor become too powerful. I shall make their lives a burden to them. I shall make them slaves." Therefore the Egyptians set taskmasters over the children of Israel to make them work as hard as men can work. Pharaoh wanted treasure cities built. The slave drivers made the Hebrews build them. But the harder they worked, and the more rigorous their lives, the stronger the Israelites grew, and the more they multiplied. "Work them harder yet," Pharaoh commanded. "Increase their burdens, double their labors. Make each man work until he drops, and then flog him until he works again." The Egyptian overseers did as they were ordered. In every way they made life bitter for the children of Israel, driving each man to work to the very limit of his strength. The Hebrews carried great loads of bricks and mortar, and they built from morn to night. They slaved in the fields with the crops and the cattle. They dug and they dragged and they carried to the sound of the whip and the shout. And they were beaten savagely if their masters thought they were not working hard or fast enough. And yet, in spite of the misery of their lives, the Israelites continued to thrive. Then the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives and ordered them to destroy all boy babies when they were born to the women of Israel. But the midwives believed in the God of Israel and could not bring themselves to obey the king. Instead, they saved the boy children and told Pharaoh that Hebrew women were not in the habit of waiting for midwives before having their babies, and that therefore they had been unable to follow his orders. Pharaoh thereupon devised another plan. He gave his people a cruel command. "Every son that is born to the Israelites from this day on, you shall cast into the river. Only the daughters shall you save alive." Now there was a man of the house of Levi who had married a woman of his tribe. They already had a 3-year-old son named Aaron and a daughter Miriam. And now the woman bore another boy. When she saw what a lovely, sturdy child he was, she could not bear to part with him, least of all in the terrible way commanded by the king, and she kept him hidden so that the king's men would not find him. For 3 months she managed to keep his birth a secret. But then she found that she could no longer hide him. Pharaoh's men were coming too close to her home in their search for Hebrew babies. So she wove for him a basket out of bulrushes, shaping it like a tiny covered ark and plastering it with pitch and clay to keep the water out. She laid the child inside it and set the basket down among the tall reeds at the river's edge. Sadly she turned away and went back to her house. But her little daughter Miriam stayed hidden among the reeds a short distance away to see what would become of her baby brother. A group of women in fine clothes came into view. They were maidens of Pharaoh's household, come down to the river with the daughter of Pharaoh, for Pharaoh's daughter meant to bathe in this quiet stream with its concealing bulrushes. The women walked together along the river bank while Miriam watched, and then Pharaoh's daughter saw the strange little woven boat lying among the reeds. At once she sent a maid to bring it to her, and she opened it and saw the child, and the baby began to cry. Pharaoh's daughter picked him up tenderly and with compassion in her heart, for she knew about her father's cruel decree. "This is one of the Hebrew children," she said gently, and she could not think of letting the lovely innocent baby die. Sister Miriam watched from the tall reeds and saw the look of love and pity on the princess's face. She left her hiding place and went to the Pharaoh's daughter, who was holding the child as if he were her own. "Shall I go and bring you a nurse from among the Hebrew women?" the girl asked eagerly, "so that she may nurse the child for you?" "Yes, go," Pharaoh's daughter said to her, and the baby's sister ran off to find her mother. The woman of Levi came quickly and saw the princess holding the tiny baby she herself had placed so lovingly in the bulrush basket. "Take this child away," Pharaoh's daughter said softly to its mother, "and nurse him for me. I will give you wages for your work." Then the woman with a happy heart took back her own child and nursed him with the mother's love and care. No longer was she afraid that harm would come to him, for Pharaoh's daughter was the boy's protection. When the child was old enough to leave his mother, she took him to the palace and gave him to Pharaoh's daughter, knowing that he would be well looked after. Pharaoh's daughter called him Moses, because she said, "I drew him out of the water," and the boy became her son. Moses, the Hebrew boy, grew up in the palace of the Pharaoh, who feared and hated Hebrews, but Pharaoh's daughter cherished him and saw to it that he was educated as if he were a royal prince. From the Egyptians he learned much of the arts and sciences unknown to his own people, and from his mother's early training he learned that he was one of the children of Israel, whose God was the one true God. As he grew to manhood, he would often leave the royal palace and go out among his own people. He would see their sufferings and their heavy burdens, and the taskmasters who drove and struck them. And it happened on one of those days that he walked among his fellow men that he saw an Egyptian overseer reach out his hand against a Hebrew slave and strike the man unmercifully. Moses suddenly forgot himself, forgot that he was a noble in the court of Pharaoh. All he could think of was that a brutal slave driver had struck a brother Hebrew. He swiftly looked this way and that, and when he saw that there was no one watching him, he hit out savagely and killed the Egyptian. Carefully he hid the body in the sand and quietly went away. He knew that he had been wrong to kill the man, but he had seen much oppression and his anger had been great. The next day he went out again. This time he saw two men of the Hebrews fighting one another, and he said to the one who was in the wrong, "Why do you strike your fellow Hebrew?" The man stared back at him with hatred in his eyes, not knowing that Moses loved his people and only wished them well. "Who made you a prince and a judge over us?" the man said bitterly. "Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" Fear struck at Moses' heart. So the deed was known. It was being talked about. Word of his crime would surely come to Pharaoh, and the punishment would be terrible. He turned away from the two men and walked off rapidly. He would have to flee at once. It was not long before the king heard about the murder of his overseer and gave commands that Moses be found and put to death. But Moses had already gone. He left the land of Egypt and traveled deep into the wilderness, looking for a place where he might be safe from Pharaoh's wrath and live in peace. Somewhere he would find a new home and forget the past and the riches and the tyranny of Egypt. He came eventually, tired and footsore, to the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now Jethro, the priest of Midian, had 7 daughters. While Moses was resting at the well, they came there with their father's flock to draw water and fill the troughs so that the sheep might drink. But as they tried to water their flocks, other shepherds came with flocks and tried to drive the women away. It was not the first time this had happened, for there were few wells in the wilderness. The flocks were many, and the daughters of Jethro were no match for the rough, discourteous men. But this time there was a stranger at the well, a man who looked like an Egyptian, and for once the women had a man to help them. Moses stood up and firmly held the shepherds back while he helped the 7 sisters draw their water, and he filled the troughs until the thirsty sheep had drunk their fill. When the women came home, their father was surprised to see them, for they were earlier than usual. "How is it that you have come so soon today?" he asked. "There was an Egyptian at the well," they said. "He defended us from the rough shepherds, and he drew water for us, and he watered our flock himself." "Well, where is he?" demanded Jethro. "Why did you not bring the stranger with you? Go and call him that he may eat with us." And so they did. The family of Jethro welcomed Moses to their home, and a friendship quickly grew between them. Moses was happy with his new friends. When Jethro asked him to stay with them, Moses was grateful and content to live in Midian. He soon took charge of the family flocks and spared the women from their work. In time, Jethro gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses for his wife. She bore him 2 sons, and they all lived a peaceful life together in the land of Midian. The man who had learned so much from the wise teachers of Egypt had now become a simple shepherd in a wilderness far from the land of Pharaoh and the captive Hebrews. He could not forget the sadness and slavery of his own people, but he was an outcast and a murderer who could find no way to help them. And then the king of Egypt died. At first there was rejoicing among the Israelites, for they thought his cruelty might die with him and that their lot would change. Their hopes were quickly shattered. The new Pharaoh was even more cruel than the old, and the children of Israel were forced into a state of slavery and misery worse than they had ever known. They cried to heaven with the anguish of their bondage, and their cries went up to God. The Lord heard the agony of their voices and saw their dreadful burden. In his great pity he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob, and he resolved to set their children free. A man would have to be found who was capable of leading the Israelites to freedom. Moses, a man of the tribe of Levi and a man who knew both Hebrews and Egyptians well, might be such a leader. Yet he was far away in exile, hiding from a king, knowing nothing of recent happenings in Egypt.
The burning bush. For many days and months and years, Moses tended the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, priest of Midian. As time went by, he thought less and less of faraway Egypt, although he never quite forgot. So far as he knew, he would be nothing but a shepherd all his life, caring for another man's sheep. One day he led the flock to the far side of the desert in search of greener pastures, and he came to the foot of Mount Horeb, also known as Sinai, which was the mountain of God. As he grazed his flock, he saw, some distance from him, a most unusual sight. A flame sprang suddenly from the middle of a bush, and as he watched, the bush kept burning brightly with the fire until it seemed that it would surely turn to ashes and die. But the flames kept on blazing through the dry desert shrub, and yet the bush was not destroyed. "This is strange indeed," said Moses to himself. "I must turn aside and look more closely at this great sight to see why the bush does not burn through and die." It was the angel of the Lord in the flame of fire, though Moses did not know it yet. He left his flock and slowly came toward the burning bush. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, he called out to Moses from the midst of the miraculous fire and said, "Moses, Moses!" Moses looked about him in astonishment. "Here I am," he answered. God's voice came again from the burning bush. "Do not come closer. Take off your shoes, for this is holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, the God of all your people." Moses took off his shoes as he was bidden and hid his face, for now he knew why the bush was not consumed by the fire, and he was afraid to look upon his God. The heavenly voice went on, "I have seen the sufferings of my people in Egypt, and I have heard the cries wrought from them by their Egyptian taskmasters. I do know their oppressions and their sorrows, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians. I will bring them out of that land into another, a good land and large, flowing with milk and honey, the land of Canaan. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may lead forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt to the promised land." Moses was astounded by these words. "I lead them out of Egypt?" he thought to himself in wonderment, for he had no notion of how he would set about such a difficult task. He said to God, "Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and lead the children of Israel out of Egypt? I do not know how I shall do it." "Fear not," said the Lord. "I will be with you, and this shall be a token to show that I have sent you. I tell you now that when you have brought my people out of Egypt, you will worship me upon this mountain of Sinai. But when I go to the children of Israel and say to them that the God of their fathers has sent me to them, what if they no longer know their God? Moses protested, for he knew how easy it was for people to turn to idols and forget the one true God. If they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, you shall tell them that I am Jehovah, he who exists that you may exist. You shall say that you have been sent by the God who made all mankind. And this also shall you say to the children of Israel. The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and by it shall I be remembered through all generations. And then God described to Moses how he should free the Israelites. Go and gather the elders of Israel together, and say to them that I, the Lord God of your fathers, have appeared to you. Tell them that I have seen what is being done to my people in Egypt, and that I will lead them out of their bondage into a land flowing with milk and honey. They will listen to your voice. And then you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord God of the Hebrews has appeared to us. Now let us go, we beg you, 3 days' journey into the wilderness, so that we may make offerings to the Lord our God. And I am sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go even for these 3 days. No, he shall refuse completely. And then I will stretch out and strike Egypt with the wonders I will do in the midst of them. After that, the king will let you go. And you shall not go empty-handed. For the Egyptians will give your people fine clothes and jewels of gold and silver, and you will take these things with you. But they will not believe me or listen to my voice, Moses protested. They will say, the Lord has not appeared to you. Who are you to say that he has done so? How shall I make them believe? They will believe, God answered. What is that in your hand? It is my shepherd's rod, said Moses. And God said, cast it on the ground. Moses obeyed. He threw his shepherd's crook down on the ground and started back in horror, for it had turned into a wriggling snake. Do not be afraid of it, said God. Reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out his hand unwillingly and grasped the tail, and at once the snake became a harmless rod in his hand. That is so they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers has appeared to you, God said. Now reach your hand beneath your cloak and place it against your chest. Moses did so, and when he drew his hand out from beneath his cloak, he saw that it was white as snow and diseased as if with leprosy. Again, said God, put your hand once more against your chest. And Moses once again reached beneath his cloak and placed his hand against himself. This time, when he drew it out, it had turned again into healthy flesh. If they do not believe these signs, said the Lord, there will be other signs that they will believe. After these signs you will take water from the river and pour it onto the dry land, and the water from the river will turn at once to blood. But Moses was still not convinced that he was the man to set his people free. Oh, my Lord, he said, I am not an eloquent speaker. My tongue is slow. My words are halting. I know not how to use my speech so that men may be persuaded. Who made man's mouth, said God? Was it not I? Who makes the dumb or deaf or the seeing or the blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Therefore go now, and give no more thought to your halting speech. I will be with your mouth, and I will teach you what to say. Oh, my Lord, I pray you, Moses pleaded, send another man, not me. Then the Lord was angry with him. Is not Aaron the Levite your brother? He said sternly. I know that he speaks well. I know, too, that he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad of heart. Therefore let him be your spokesman. I will teach you what to do and say, and you will speak to him and put the right words in his mouth. He shall be your mouth, and you will instruct him in what he has to do, and you will take that rod in your hands and do signs with it as I have shown you. Then Moses had nothing more to say. He left the holy mountain and the bush that would not burn to ash, and he returned to Jethro, his father-in-law. The story that he told was strange, but Jethro was a good man and a priest, and he believed that Moses truly had been given a mission. It was right, he said, for Moses to return to Egypt and see if his people were still living. "Go in peace," said Jethro. Yet Moses was still uneasy about returning to the place from which he had fled in haste so many years before. God spoke again to Moses in the land of Midian. "Go, return to Egypt," said the Lord, "for all the men who sought your life are dead." So Moses saddled up his donkeys and took his wife and sons with him on his journey into Egypt, and all the while he held the rod of God firmly in his hand. The Lord said to Moses, "When you return to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the wonders that I have put into your hand. His heart will be hard against you, and at first he shall not let the people go. But the harder his heart, the greater shall be his punishment, and my people shall be freed." And he said to Moses' brother Aaron in Egypt, "Go out into the wilderness and meet your brother Moses." So Aaron went out from Egypt and met Moses at the mountain of God, and he greeted his brother with love. Moses told Aaron everything the Lord had said to him, and all about the signs he was to show to the people in the land of Egypt. Aaron's faith and great enthusiasm gave Moses the extra strength he needed. Together, the two brothers of the tribe of Levi traveled back to Egypt with the woman Zipporah and her 2 sons riding on the donkeys. And as soon as they arrived, they gathered together all the elders of the children of Israel and told them that God had sent Moses to deliver them from the unfriendly land. Aaron spoke as one inspired. Eloquently, persuasively, he told the elders everything the Lord had said to Moses, and he showed them the signs that proved that Moses had indeed seen God. And when the people heard his words and saw the signs, they believed with all their hearts that the Lord had truly visited them and seen their suffering. For the first time in many years, they felt real hope that they would be freed from slavery, and they bowed their heads and worshiped God.